Hello, and welcome back to
Hi.
Goalie Interference. Mike McKenna of the Daily Faceoff is here, angry about Capo Kakinen per Shang Peng that I just saw.
Angry about him. Come on, man. I'm just
You
giving
said
my
he
honest
needs a complete
analysis.
rebuild or something.
Well, he does.
What was it?
Well, he
Well,
needs a
you're
complete
probably
technical
not wrong.
overhaul.
I don't know.
No, I know I'm
Complete
right about
technical overhaul. You know who else needs a
that.
complete technical overhaul? That's me, because I am not focused on the Golden Knights at the moment, and we should be. We shouldn't be focused on Capo Kakinen, even though it's possible he's in the goal tomorrow. I think he might be in the goal tomorrow. Nonetheless, let's focus on the Golden Knights, and they have their own goalie situation. Week to week is the official term on Logan Thompson. However, there's a bit of cold water in the McPhee podcast with Bob. What was his name? Bob McCown? Fido Bobcat. I don't know what that means, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
A little bit of cold water kind of saying that, there are timelines, and if he hits those timelines, we'll be okay. But he was a little seemingly concerned that he may not. Mentioning about cap, and I don't know where the cap came in on Thompson. Nonetheless, let's just play the short-term game. We know he's out for probably the rest of February at the absolute least, probably all the way till the deadline here. How comfortable are you with Hill and Bressois?
Well, I think that the Golden Knights are in a pretty good place here, and that they at least have goalies that have a lot of experience. They're not going to be like the Toronto Maple Leafs that have Joseph Woll moving in, who has 5 games NHL experience despite a decent resume at the minor league level and at the college level. What's been encouraging for me is to just hear the way that Bressois has been talking. I don't think we really understood how hurt he was last year, and how hurt he has honestly been for a lot of his pro career. We're finding out, like he's. I guess I need to set this up for people to talk about Bressois, because I'm going to get to Hill here. And it's funny that we're leading with a goalie thing, but hey, this is the big story with Thompson being out.
That's the point.
It's right, dude, and that's who knows it better, I guess. But
what we're doing, yeah.
So Bressois, without having spoken to him and knowing exactly what his ailment was, if it's a hip, generally when somebody has hip problems as a goalie, this is generally speaking, they got a square peg and a round hole. Okay. The top of their femur is wearing down the cartilage in their hip. And that's like 1 in 4 people. So like goalies are really hard on their hips now because of the butterfly, and because we've done it since we were 9-10 years old. It's a somewhat recent phenomenon in the last 15 years or so because of that. People always assume knees. Well, because people think, you're in bad knees. Catchers have bad knees in baseball, and it's different for us. So what Bressois indicated is that he really hasn't had the hip mobility that a lot of people have had because of his ailment. And again, whatever it may have been,
he said.
Right. So, he could be somebody like a Thatcher Demko. Thatcher Demko had double hip surgery in college at BC. And it gave him more flexibility. It gave him more hip mobility. It made him a better goalie, even though it's a daunting and scary recovery. And so I do have, by the way, in the chat, they're saying I have very big hands. See, I'll tell you what, I do have big hands, but it's also the depth perception thing. It's like if you ever see somebody hold up a rattlesnake in front of them and the snake looks like it's 9 feet tall, like 9 feet long, it's because of depth perception. So I
know a goalie that would probably have a rattlesnake.
Not I, but I've seen them in the wild. I've found them in the wild. No, but he doesn't keep any hots. He only has non-venomous. But in any case, Bressois said how he's felt better and better, and he thinks he could maybe be even better because of his, better hip mobility. So that's one piece. Here, I'm going to get to Hill now. This is his time. Okay, like straight up, this is his time. Because, the game against Anaheim, I thought that was probably his cleanest game from a technical perspective. I only saw him on his ass twice, I think. Now, it wasn't a difficult game. It's a tough metric, So there's good and bad to that. I think that game should be one that he felt great about himself, because he did make some big saves. He starts off the second period with a breakaway save to keep it 2-1, and there were good pockets of that. But we're really going to see over the next month here what Aidan Hill's made of, if you ask me, because Bruce Cassidy has said Bressois' playing time is going to depend on how Bressois plays. That means to me
on how Hill plays.
Net.
Yes,
it's Hill's net, And Hill's going to play 2/3, 3/4, unless he doesn't play well and Brossoit plays excellent. So all the question marks that I have about Hill's game, we're going to see. And like I say, like I really thought he looked pretty mechanically sound in that game against Anaheim, but it's a 1-game sample. And how is it going to fare against a team that can really move a puck around laterally? That can really get moving, that makes him skate, because that's not his strongest area. We're going to find out. And this is the real test for him. But I think it's really a matter of just getting through this. Thompson will be back. And I'm at this point, no doubt in my mind, Golden Knights, hey, they're going to make the playoffs. That should be fine. But they're going to need Thompson to be ready when he shows up. So it is imperative that Hill has a nice couple of weeks here. We're going to see what he's made of, man. This is his chance. And I'm pretty excited because he hasn't had a chance to really run with it. He's going to actually have some rhythm here. And that matters. You should.
He hasn't had a chance here. Yeah. I should have written down notes as you were. I had a few different things to poke at. First of all, I'll start with Brossoit. Yes, I love what I'm hearing out of Brossoit, that it's been so long since he's had this mobility that this is an opportunity for him to be able to move in a way and have, like, I think he said he has function that he hasn't had since he was in juniors. That's exciting. That leads you to believe that potentially there is more to his game that wasn't there as when he was a backup. My concern with that is you've got a goalie coach watching him. You've got AHL coaches watching him. You've got, I'm assuming Bruce Cassidy's going back and watching some of these games. All these opportunities come. He comes up to practice. He's here for a couple days in practice, and they're still saying Hill's the starter. And we know that the trust level in Hill has never really been all that high. So for them to just go straight into saying, okay, Hill's the guy, and throughout all these opportunities of chances that Brossoit had to get back in there, they didn't give it to him. They really still haven't given it to him. He still has not played a game. I don't think he plays tomorrow. I don't think he plays Saturday. So I still think we're 7 days, 7 days away.
You see him against Chicago, I think, is likely.
That leads me to, like, I try to, when I do like scouting or like planning on what I think is going to happen in the future, I do take a lot of kind of the actions of the guys who are doing the scouting, who have historically done it, and their unwillingness to at least make this a true competition straight off the hop leads me to believe that they don't fully buy that they've got this renaissance version of Laurent Brossoit. He can certainly prove them wrong. He's going to have that opportunity. I'm just not sure that we should be expecting that despite hearing that.
So let me touch on this, that Brossoit's been in the American League all year. And I think it's truly because the two goalies that the team took were just straight up Thompson and Hill. I don't think there was any intention of Brossoit being in the NHL until there was an injury. I've been consistent,
like early.
I've been consistent with this from the start of the year, Ken. I've seen this play out too many times. I've seen a million times I've seen teams try to make a goalie sound like, hey, this guy's a big part of our team, and he goes to the American League. All they're trying to do is keep that guy ready.
Goalie, I'm assuming, yeah.
And by the way, that was,
and I get that.
Tucker just made a cameo here, so
there you go.
I have to be. By the way, I am down here in my office today. Yeah, I'm in my office today because my in-laws are here. But
fair enough. I just don't quite believe that we're going to see something massively different out of Brossoit. I just think that the issues that were there are probably still going to be there. I don't know that we're going to see something different. That doesn't mean he may not be the best of the three goalies. He very well might. I'm just, if they believed it, if it was as significant as it was getting this function back in his hips, having more movement, I think he would have shown it at the AHL level to the point where they would have said, we got to get this guy games.
No, they wouldn't have called him up regardless. But I'll stick to that till the day I die because I lived that. But I do think that Brossoit. So here's the thing: Brossoit is an NHL goalie for me, man, and I really believe
for sure. At least a backup for sure.
He's a 905, 908 goalie in the NHL. I think is realistic. His career numbers, I think, really reflect who he probably should be as an NHL goalie. And if that's what the Golden Knights get out of him until Thompson's back, they should win hockey games. But I'll tell you where Hill's going to make his money. For me, when they start to play against these better teams that can zip it, like I say, Colorado, Dallas, I mean, even Calgary. I know Calgary's. I want to see Aidan Hill kill penalties. Okay.
Yep.
Now I know the Golden Knights don't take many. We'll touch on that in a bit. But to me, that's where I think he can make the biggest difference against those clubs. And you'll really see if structurally he's made some strides. Because if you look out of control on a penalty kill, your game is not where it needs to be at the NHL. You need to be dialed, clean, crisp. And if you want to watch that now, I feel it's bad because I was hoping Gustafsson was going to play for Minnesota. There's a guy who's really in control. He's a good example of that. So I don't know. I think the Golden Knights are in a pretty good place with the goaltending. I think considering all things considered, they should be okay. But I don't think you're going to see any games get stolen here. This is
right. Well, I don't know that we were seeing that before.
Yeah, I think Thompson definitely had some moments this year where he did, and it's a bummer because man, he had played. Thompson was so good in those couple games coming back from break. You know, he was really good. I thought against Minnesota and the bit that he was, and Nashville. He didn't play against Nash because you weren't going to play. You weren't going to play him in that game. Right. But I thought leading up to it, the game after it was strong for him. So
that's fair.
We'll see.
My concern with him, and I'm wondering where you're going to go with him, is I think the situation is set up for him to come back hurt. I just think it's screaming he's going to come back too soon, just because there's only so many scenarios. Yeah, there's only so many scenarios that can potentially happen here. If Hill's good, he's going to want to get back in there and get his job back. If Hill's bad, the team's going to start slipping, and he's going to want to get in there and save the team as he tried to do a year ago. This team does not have a good history of putting goalies in the goal when they're not healthy. Let me try to put this that was a roundabout way of saying this team plays injured goalies. They do it all the time. They've done it for 5 years running. I don't think that is going to change. I think you even have another guy in Thompson who's going to be more willing to play injured than even the previous two guys were, because he's finally getting his opportunity to take a job, run with it, and make it his own. And I have a massive concern that no matter what we see over the course of the next 3 to 4 weeks, he's going to want to rush himself back in there. And he's going to come back from having a month off, and he's going to be right back in the middle of a competition. It's going to be awfully difficult for him to step right back in and play at the same level that he was playing at before. I think there's a little bit of a trouble. I see clouds on the horizon. Let me put it that way.
Okay. I'll give you that because I would share those same concerns. Maybe not as much with the injury front. Now, we don't know the true driving force of Robin Lehner being forced to dress games totally hurt. And to frankly start games completely hurt.
Correct.
We don't know. Nope. There's been plenty of, unsubstantiated rumblings that Robin had to start the game that he was eventually pulled where he allowed 2 goals, remember? First period, yep. Right? Unsubstantiated things that said he's paid to start these games. And then DeBoer got him out of there immediately. Well, DeBoer's not the coach any longer. I really believe Cassidy has always had I admire how Cassidy has handled goalkeepers in terms of playing time in the past. I don't think he's had to deal with not having a Tuukka Rask before for very long, where he's been able to just kind of let him play and Cassidy didn't put Rask on the hook very often, right? He didn't need to. Rask was pretty unbelievable for him for a long time.
Right.
I think at times this year he's pushed a little bit hard with the goalies, especially with somebody like Logan, who to me rides an emotional roller coaster. But regardless, I think he's going to have a pretty good grasp on playing time with this. But it is, listen, dude, if they lose, if this next sequence here, they should win 4 of the 6 in the remaining games in February. No questions asked, minimum 4 or 6, considering who they're playing against. If you trot Hill out for 5 of those 6 games and he loses 4 of those, you're going to see Brossoit have every opportunity to play after that, because then they would be back back into that situation where you're dealing with wild card scenario.
Yep.
And then it gets back to it. So we'll see. I have confidence though with the way the team's played again in the micro scale against bad teams coming back from break, to think that there's more viability from this club now than there was pre-break.
That's fair. I would agree with that. When you saw the Thompson injury, what was your first thought of what was hurt there?
Immediately knee for him. The way he moved, the way he extended, and kind of the way his leg came back underneath him, I thought, okay, he's
and he grabbed,
kind of twist.
He reached back and kind of grabbed for it. Yeah.
And I can't remember. I think it's left leg, if I remember right. Looking at, correct me if I'm wrong on this. I can't remember which one, but it was the way he moved across. Like even before, I thought he was kind of out of control in the first place, and then he went to move across, and I went, "Oh, he popped his knee," because I've felt that before, and that's why the way he was getting off the ice without putting any pressure on that thing. We'll see what the imaging says. I was like, dude, that's a 4 to 6 for sure. That's a tendon or a ligament or something there that's going to need some recovery time.
So our resident doctor, Dr. Pinniger, that was one of his first thoughts, but another one of his first thoughts was he thought it was potentially a hip, that there was some sort of hip issue again. And that would have been, that would have been 4 hips on 3 goalies in 12 months, because Leonard had both and Brossoit had one. And I think you start asking questions. I don't know if it's a hip. If you don't believe it's a hip, let's just pass on that. I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Yeah, I'll
probably
finish.
More likely me. Yeah.
I'll finish on that one. Hips are things that don't just pop. Okay, hips are a degenerative thing for goalies more often than not, where a knee injury can be a finite thing that happens. And to me, that's what it looked like for him. So that's what I'm guessing. And just the way he was getting off the ice. So we'll see. But I hope it's not too long. He was finally starting to kind of really come around and play some good hockey again.
And the longer it takes, the trickier it is jumping back in. And then how successful does he coming back in? How long does he have before he gets back in? Where are we in the playoff picture at that point? How close are we to the playoffs? Is he then the starter? Like, if they're going to make the playoffs, Hill's going to have to play pretty good over the course of this next 10, 15 games that it's going to be. So we're suddenly going to be back into that question mark of, like, does he just regain his starter job immediately if Hill's playing pretty well? And then where does Brossoit fit in? How does that work? How does waivers work if they end up needing to get rid of him? We got a lot in front of us. We'll get to that down the road. But first, before we get to the next topic, and I'm actually going to take Nick's $5 super chat over here, I'm going to tell you that goalie interference is brought to you by the Jimerson Law Firm. Jimerson Law Firm is one of Las Vegas's preeminent law firms specializing in high-stakes civil, I don't know what I was saying there, civil, family, and business litigation. When winning matters, seek out the Jimerson Law Firm. When dinner matters, I need to seek out the Jimerson Law Firm, because I haven't been to dinner with Jim Jimerson for quite some time, and I'm not happy about that. And with that, I'm going to turn this off so that we can actually see this comment, because Nick gave us $5. Nice of Nick to do that. Nick wants to hear about the best chirps and masterminds behind them while you were playing. Mike, go.
It's tough. It's funny that, like, to give it a Vegas related theme, I can remember Marchessault screaming at guys on the bench, and it was always so funny because he's French Canadian. And there was a guy named Garnett Exelby at one point in the NHL, and he got sent down to the American League, and Marshy and I were teammates in Springfield, and I was backing up. I'll never forget Marshy screaming at him, "F you, Exelby." He couldn't say Exelby. Exelby, you suck, Exelby. And he just kept yelling it at him. It was so funny. But, like, as far as guys actually carving one another, I'm trying to think of my times in the NHL with guys that can really send it. And I mean, Marchand really is what you hear about. Like, he just talks nonstop the whole game. But goalies don't hear a ton of this. Like, JT Miller would chirp like crazy, and it was always just the stupidest stuff. Like, it was just mindless. Like, it was just, I'm going to score on you next shift. And I'm like, great, hot shot. You're in the American League and you're 21. Good deal. Like, you're chirping a 33. I remember Jake Virtanen at 20 years old, after he'd been sent down, trying to chirp a 34-year-old me. And I looked at him, I'm like, man, you are a 20-year-old has-been. Best chirps. It was, a lot of them were simple. Like, I even go back to, like, junior hockey, when guys would wear a full shield. A full, like, clear shield. And the first time I ever heard somebody say this, I laughed my ass off. And a player looks at the other guy, he goes, "I can't hear you. Roll your window down." Like, stupid stuff like that. Which was
hockey players hysterical. Do not like full. They don't like that. They don't like full cages. No. They don't like full bubbles. It is widely considered a strength or a sign of weakness. What about the scrums when there are those posts whistle
Yeah,
scrums.
one of the best guys I ever played with was Eric Weinrich. Played a long time in the NHL. He was a U.S. Olympian. He talked like this and had a really dry sense of humor. And he would just always yell at guys. Somebody would fall or they'd just get through the neutral zone in a really bad way and be like, "Hey, 5, take the training wheels off. You can't skate. Take the training wheels off." That was always funny. Antoine Roussel was vicious. He was vicious, vicious. And he would go for the throat, man. Like he would scout out the players in that team, on the opposing team, and he'd go after anything that he knew about them. And he would drop his gloves before face off. Like Rooster was just nasty. And I hated playing against somebody who was a great teammate. Tough. Like, and his family makes maple syrup, and he gave me a can of it. And I was very happy about that. So, yeah, that's just a couple. I'm sure as we go along here, I'll remember more of these and I'll bring them up.
I'll give you, I don't know if this one necessarily falls in chirping today, but there was quite the moment on the ice today where after practice, all of a sudden everyone's standing there watching and Paul Cotter's skating laps back and forth. And he did, I would say it was probably 4, maybe 5 full length sprints back and forth down the ice with everyone watching him. And then he stopped and, stick taps and whatever. And we're all like, well, what's that? So naturally you go to Marchessault because he's more likely to be the one to tell us. And he would not say. He's like, nope, I'm not saying. It's time you all find out who the real Paul Cotter is. And so we dug a little deeper. It turns out there was a bet between Stevenson and Cotter of whose shoes would sell for more at the gala. So the Golden Knights had their night gala, and whose shoes?
I saw that they had those custom Nikes on. Yeah.
And for apparently the way that this came up was that Cotter was very confident that his were going to sell for quite a bit of money. And he made a comment towards Stevenson, and Stevenson looked at him like, really? You think yours go for more than mine, huh? And Cotter was very confident in it. So they made the bet, and Cotter did not win said bet.
I can't believe that they were auctioning off shoes. Auctioning off shoes. That's a very unique Vegas thing. But some of those Nike
they made $1.2 million last on Monday night, which is pretty impressive, which is good. Yeah, some of those shoes are pretty cool. The best moment of the whole thing, though, was they had a helicopter tour with White Cloud and Kolazar, and the winning bidder was Alec Martinez.
That's pretty fantastic. Cool. And I'm sure, what I love is that Martinez still says no matter what for Super Bowl, he's going to pick the Detroit Lions.
Oh, yeah.
He's so true to the core. I love it. Yeah. I tell you what, man, for somebody who doesn't live in Vegas year round anymore, or doesn't go out there, I can't get over the disposable income in Vegas. Like just 1.3 million off of a gala like that. It's pretty wild. I wonder what the percentage of investments are in Vegas versus a Midwestern city. Like what people put into,
it's pretty wild. There. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah. All right, let's get back to the team, and I think the main story of the last 5 or 6 games, beyond winning the games or whatever it's been 4-2-2 if I'm not mistaken in the last 8. That's pretty good. Certainly the last 3 wins are good. There's debates on how well the teams they played against them played and how much we want to read into going forward. Let's put that on the back burner. I think the bigger piece out of all of it is they seem to have found a third line here. That this Stevenson, Carrier, Kessel line is all of a sudden, in many ways, kind of changing the group of players above them. All of a sudden, you have different options above them, whether it be the misfits or finding someone with Eichel, and you can suddenly make an argument that one good player being plugged in can potentially reunite the misfits as a second line, put somebody up with Eichel. Then you've got Cotter or Howden, or if Stone comes back in the playoffs, there's a lot of options up there, but it all relies on the same thing. Can Carrier, Stevenson, Kessel actually hold up consistently in tricky games against good teams? I'm not sure we have the answer to that yet.
I don't either, because Kessel's not the guy you want to have as your F3. You can't trust him as the high guy in his zone, but thankfully Kessel's pretty puck hungry. I think that this line actually works pretty well because we talked about it last week. You've got 2 guys that really skate and work in terms of, Stevenson skates like crazy. I still think there's moments where Stevenson kind of fades a little bit, but Carrier does not. He just doesn't fade, man. And you talk about a team that needs players going to the net. Well, look who went to the net for Kessel's goal the other day, right? Theodore gets at the net. Where's Carrier? I mean, right in front. I like that line across the board because to me, Kessel still has a nose for the net. He's just got to have somebody that's a little bit more responsible that can make up for him. And Stevenson at least can back check fast enough to get there. And I'm at that point where I agree with what you say about the Misfits. Like I really still don't love Carlson, Smith, Amadio. Like they've been okay. Like they're okay defensively, but they're like we're nitpicking here. But I thought their last 2 games were okay compared to really all the 3 other lines.
So did Cassidy. He played them in a 3rd line role, and that's not been common for Carlson and Smith recently.
Well, and we're seeing like Nick Wall on that 4th line at center is where he belongs, man. Mm-hmm. That line has been awesome. Howden's been great. I mean, Colson, like the way they snapped it around on Howden's goal the other night, dude, for your 4th line, that was pretty impressive, especially with the puck possession they got off the first retrieval down low, kick it out to Howden, go back to the goal line in the middle. Like, I get it that Anaheim sucks, but still, you really when you watch Waugh, like, dude, Waugh just, I mean, his exits and entries, his possession down low, and he has not had the brain fade moments that I've seen as often. Like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, man, he'd have a period where he went missing, and it's not happening. So that line's great. I like the 3rd line. I think it is pretty sustainable. I really do. That second, but the top 2, they still need somebody. I really believe that because it's honestly, and it's really, I mean, in an ideal world, it'd probably be able to mix in 2 because you want the depth. Because one of them may not even skate. I mean, I don't see Amadio being a part of this club in a full playoff lineup if you can get somebody better on the right side. He's the odd man out for me. I like Cotter in the lineup. For sure. In a perfect world. And Cotter, to me, I like him in the lineup. I think his juice is important. But if you're putting him up on a top line and Stone's back, you can make that a better line with someone else too. So I think really 1's realistic, maybe 2. But I do think that, like, I mean, even though, like, even Eichel, though, he has played really much better lately, right? To you, like, you've seen energy to him.
Been wide open. The games have been wide open. When the games are wide open, he's going to play better. Yeah.
In my notes is that if you give Eichel time and space, he will make you pay. But
let him skate out of the defensive zone. If you give him speed through the neutral zone, he can do some things and really
4 on 4. You see what he does 4 on 4.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah.
And when he's in tight, he can pick corners pretty well, and he's pretty good at driving the net. But he is not an aware player. Like that's the downfall. Like after watching him for pretty much a full season at this point, he is not aware. Offensive zone, defensive zone, and that's why I want to see Phil Kessel on the first power play unit. I would take Eichel off it. I'd put Kessel on it. I would make that change and see how it works. Kessel's the only guy on this team that can throw pucks through the middle of the ice and make it work that I've seen this year. So that's a bold statement. But at this point, when your power play is the way it is for the Golden Knights, which is not good without Mark Stone,
nope,
I would consider it.
So I'm writing about that for tomorrow because I had wasn't terribly full press conference. So we got a couple questions in a row to Cassidy, which is always nice to kind of get a question and then follow up and then follow up off the follow up. It's always nice. You feel like you're actually having a conversation with the guy. It was good. So I'll just admit, like, one of the things that anytime I see one of those graphs where all the different teams are plotted or all the different players are plotted, I'm always looking like, if the Golden Knights players are in the middle or off to the sides, wherever, okay, no big deal. It's when they're clearly best or worst at something that I really hone in on, like, what's going on here? Why are they best or worse? And I think that's actually going to be the first line of the story. So preview for that. They are the best team in not taking penalties. No team in the NHL is better at taking fewer penalties than the Golden Knights. However, they're also last in drawing penalties. To me, there has to be some correlation between that, and I'm not sure which way it goes, because them not taking penalties has been a long history. They're not a team that takes a lot of penalties over the course of the 6 years. However, they've gotten worse and worse and worse and worse over the course of the last 3 or 4 years at drawing them. I asked the question today, are they related? And he kind of said, yes, I think that sometimes they see one go one way and then there's another one and they're like, I'll let that one go. And he does seem to think that they're related. And I do think that that can go either way. But the bigger piece was then the next thing that I asked him, which was, can it benefit you to play more games at 5-on-5, to not be a team that's playing 48 minutes of 5-on-5 time? Is, maybe it's even less than that. There are probably teams that are playing 42, 43 minutes of 5-on-5 time. Where do you fall on that? And then I'll kind of give you his answer, what Cassidy said. Do you think it's beneficial for a team to just play most of their regular season at 5-on-5?
Well, you always try to stay out of the box. That's key number one. And that's a good thing.
They're doing it.
I do believe that staying out of the box to the point that you're taking the number of penalties that the Golden Knights have, which is like nothing. Okay. Like I ran numbers here real quick. In the last month, they have, let's take a look here. In the past month here, they've only been shorthanded 16 times in 9 games.
Okay. It's crazy.
So
not even 2 a game. Yeah.
And they've given up 3 power play goals, but the penalty kills at 81%. Penalty kill almost doesn't matter because they don't give up many.
Right.
I actually believe, and I've had this conversation with coaches in the past, I think that means they're a little bit soft to play against. I think that if you're really pushing the envelope, if you're really playing board battles hard, you can have the cleanest players on earth and you're going to take penalties occasionally. And that's a concern for me against, once again, the better, bigger, heavier teams. When they go to play Dallas, is Dallas going to run them through the walls? Is Calgary going to outmuscle them? These are real questions, I think. I watched the fourth line go to work with Waugh and Howden and Kolesar, and I think, you know what? They're pretty good about it. But this team isn't scary from that type of physical standpoint. They're just not any longer. They're not a punishing team. So I think that I'd like to see more of an aggressiveness, and I'm not advocating for taking penalties, man. I would gladly gladly take what's happening right now, staying out of the box. But I think it is symptomatic of how the team is built. And I do think that does kind of go the same way in that they haven't gotten, they've only had 17 power plays in the last 9 games, right? It's both directions.
Right.
That
it's crazy how low the numbers are.
I think it's just kind of part of that. They're kind of a milquetoast team, man. This isn't like burying anybody. It's just reality, So I think I will say that this really,
go ahead.
When you get to playoffs, so man, if your power play is not clicking, you're in one. You just can't win without a good power play. And even if they're not generating, they're not going to win games just 5-on-5 in playoffs. It's not going to happen.
Right.
When that intensity ratchets up, dude, it's all over.
So the comment that he said about it, and I do think I agree and I liked this, was it is teaching us how important it is to get ahead at 5-on-5. We aren't just sitting here relying on being even and then winning on special teams. We're going to just win the games on the power plays. And as long as they keep winning, they have a ton of 5-on-5 goals over the course of the last 3 games. If they're able to keep doing this, and if we see the harder games, the more locked down types of games, and they can push their way through this without there being penalties, so they take 1 and they get 1 the entire game, and it's a wash at 0-0, I do think that can benefit them long term. Just say, look, we know we can outscore teams at 5-on-5. We don't have to have a game where we get penalties. Because when you play against an Edmonton, when you play against and they're probably the best example of all of them, if you play a team that is reliant on their power play and you don't give them any, it can kind of, be like a mental block for a team of how are we going to score if they never give us penalties ever? So I do think that there is something there to saying, look, I would prefer to play much more 5-on-5 than 5 penalties aside each game. I do think that that's much better and definitely does prepare you for the more important games down the stretch. That being said, this belief that penalties go away in the playoffs is wrong. It's just factually inaccurate. There are more power plays in the playoffs. There are more penalty minutes in the playoffs, and guys don't fight in the playoffs, so we get even more minors in the playoffs. They are going to have to figure their power play out, and so far, they do not have a goal on the power play since the break. That's a problem.
Yes, it is, and I agree with your sentiments towards playing 5-on-5. It's great to do that. It is why you need to play with the lead. They've done that the past 2 games, and look how good they are when they're leading after 2 periods. Okay, 20, 1-1 when you lead after 2 periods. Yeah. And remember last week on goalie interference when we did say that the game against Minnesota, they absolutely had to play the first 10 minutes balls to the wall, and they did. And that was the game because Minnesota was tired coming back from Dallas. They stomped on them, and that's part of. Those are 2 things that I liked about this last week is that to simplify those 2 games, they took care of business. They did exactly what they needed to against Minnesota. That first period knocked them off the board, and it's no surprise Minnesota the game kind of evened off.
Minnesota quit.
They already had the bag.
You coast to the final. Yep. No problem.
That's right. And that's what happens. And then against Anaheim, listen, that game was firmly VGK for me the whole game, but the score didn't reflect it. Yeah, it didn't. And he makes a save, and then boom, all life out of Anaheim, and they for once just poured it on. Now it's also because Anaheim just sucks and they quit.
They quit. No.
Dude, the Stevenson goal or Stevenson pass to
Carrier.
Oh shoot, Carrier on the backside looked like his ball start.
Yeah,
Stevenson was just like, oh, we scored again, But
I mean, it was ridiculous. He was wide open. They both had an opportunity to take forever to make the play, and then Carrier waited, dusted the thing off, and still put it into an empty net.
Yeah. So here's the thing: this team's power play has sucked without Mark Stone. That's the only way around it. And the focal point of the power play is Jack Eichel. It's still him. It's the puck on his blade. Now, they haven't had many power plays, but I'm telling you, man, I watched those clips. I watched every power play again today to go back through it. And it's
bad.
I think they're more dangerous with Phil Kessel. And maybe you start the second line. I like Carrier in front of the net. I like Shea Theodore. By the way, I do think the team had way more of a shot mentality the last 2 games. From the point from outside, and it actually resulted in
unfortunately Nick Higgs are getting blocked and leading to 2-on-1s the other way too often. But yes,
and that was a tough. Listen, Haig kind of had to pinch a little at the blue line. He didn't pinch, but he tried to make a play, and Cotter didn't back check hard enough on it. But I do think that shot mentality has been better, and you can tell they're trying. They got the memo, at least I'd say, that we got to get pucks to the net. Now, who's going to consistently go there is still the question. But power play, I mean, if sticking Carrier in front if you go Carrier, Kessel, and maybe if you just mix it up so you have Marchessault, Kessel, Theodore, I don't know, dude. You can't keep trotting out Eichel the first time if nothing's working. So
I remain concerned if you take Eichel's power play time away, do you lose Eichel even more at 5-on-5? I think that's a real concern that sometimes there is man managing that has to go on. There are egos on this team. You're going to have to figure it out. And I would be weary of that. I think they're better off trying to find a way to actually utilize dusting the puck off on Jack's stick. They don't utilize it. No one moves. Everyone just waits for him to do something, and no one moves. The other, what would it be? 8 guys standing on the ice, 9 if you count the goalie, just stand there and wait, and nothing really happened. That's where I think I'd like to see something different. Let me move on to a different topic, which is one that I want your history of understanding the travel a little bit better than I do, understanding the grind of a full season. I think yours is a little different playing goalie than being a skater. But George McPhee was on this podcast, and there were 2 different things that he brought up about injuries. The first one was that the Golden Knights had been to back-to-back Western Conference finals, and because that had happened, That's why they had such a problem with injuries the year before. In a normal setting, I think that that's probably fair. If you go to, you're playing till the middle of May every single time, everyone else is off in April. Most of the teams are off by the same time. You have a short off season. You have to come right back in it. You didn't win. That makes it even harder. He mentioned that as well. I think that that's fair. You might get the bump if you get all the way and win it. Okay, that's fair. Problem is, they didn't have regular Western Conference finals. One of them was a bubble that they took 3 months off in the middle of the season, came back out and were healthy because of that. Then the other one was a 56-game season that they went to the Stanley Cup final with 20 games in the back end of that. They played 76 games that season in what he claimed was a long season. Ridiculous. That's number one. Point two is he then said this year, 5 games in 8 days, followed by games every other day for the next 3 weeks, wore them down to the point that it took a toll on the entire team. That's what he said. Where are you on hearing those two things? They seem like just like, and I'm going to print out the message from their wall. Those are excuses. Those are ridiculous excuses.
That's the word I was going to use, because every team in the league goes through that. But what McPhee is not eloquently explaining here is that every team goes through it and you feel that fatigue and you tire, but you have to be able to fight through that and keep playing. It should not be an excuse. And you have to be very clear about that. And I'll be I didn't hear this podcast, so I might be totally blowing this up. I might be representing this in the wrong way, but from how you've presented it, that's what I would think. Every team does go through that, but the good teams, it doesn't matter, man. Boston, they're clobbering everybody. Carolina, they didn't give a shit, right? To me, I actually think the Golden Knights haven't had, I know December was a bear, and I have not counted the number of back-to-back games that the Golden Knights have had this year. But I remember looking it's nothing.
Low.
I remember
looking
at, I can't remember who I was looking at the other day, but somebody had 8 of them left, back-to-backs. Mm-hmm. I can't remember if it was Dallas or who it was, but I just remember thinking wow,
the Golden Knights had one of the lightest in the league. Yeah.
It's back-to-backs are your only crusher, man, because otherwise everybody plays. And
why are back-to-backs so much worse? What is that one day in between that helps so much?
Because it's when you go back-to-back, you're purely grinding and your body never fully recovers. As hard as this game is and the pace at which they play, your body doesn't totally recover for that second game. That's why you see that big burst of energy at the start, and then it goes swoons, and then you might be able to find it for the third. It's predictable. It's real. You feel this as an athlete, that you can mentally amp yourself up, but your body just can't sustain it. And that's where, Minnesota the other night, it was kind of that great example, right? They wasn't there, man, especially with travel.
So then, looking forward, if we're going to accept that, I particularly don't really. I also think that it's quite interesting.
I think it's an excuse. I agree with you. It's an excuse.
You look at when the Golden Knights have been at their best, and I think we need to slow the horsies down quite a bit here. Not the Henderson horsies, the metaphorical horsies about how good the Golden Knights are. Out of the beginning of the regular season, off of a ton of rest, they play great. They have to play more and more and more and more and more games. It starts to fall off. They get more and more and more and more injured. They get 10 days off. They play great. Now they're going to play more and more and more and more and more games. And I'm afraid that we're headed towards injuries because he said, and what I'm saying is this one you cannot blow out of proportion. You can't get this wrong. I will basically directly quote it. He said, we played 5 games in 8 days around Thanksgiving, and then we had a game every other day until Christmas. If you look at their schedule, they did. He's not wrong in that. However, that's your schedule in March. That is the schedule in March and April all the way out. There are 2 times where they have an extra day throughout the entirety of basically all of March and April. If they couldn't handle it around Thanksgiving when the games didn't matter nearly as much, when other teams were banged up, is he setting up for this to happen again?
Well, and they're only playing probably out of those 9 games in March, maybe 3 or 4 of them are kind of gimmies that you look at.
There's not a lot. There's not a lot.
And you know what I mean by gimmies or games that you should at least.
There's a Columbus, there's a Philly.
Montreal, Columbus, but even Philly's playing better. Honestly, Vancouver's a wild card. You never know what you're getting with Vancouver. Yeah. So it's 3 to 4 of those. But they're all Pacific. There's a decent amount of Pacific games, but it's not all of them, right? You're going to have a tough road trip in the middle of it. I don't think he's setting it up, but I think he's. I mean, dude, I'm telling you, this is one of the hardest road trips I've ever seen. So I think it's very real.
Florida, Tampa, Carolina, St. Louis on a back-to-back, and then Philly. It's brutal.
Philly. It's terrible. Like, that's a brutal trip to go from, like, the 2 Floridas or whatever. But you're playing at home against Montreal and then flying 3.5 hours to Florida. We went through this last week. It is a tough road trip. Carolina to St. Louis. Dude, that's a 2.5 hour flight for the next day and then go back to Philly 3. Like, I'm dreading that for that club and then have to come home and play Calgary. That span from the 5th to the 16th is where you're going to see what this club is made of for the second time this year. Because the first time didn't go great.
We showed what they were made of, and they weren't made of very much. So when you say, what are they made of? Do you mean health or do you mean winning?
I mean both. That's really the direction I was going, is that if this team isn't healthy for this stretch, I think they're in trouble. They have to stay healthy because we saw it. Like, you go through a grind like that and it's tough. And you know who they can't lose? They can't afford to lose one of these top 6 D-men again. Okay. Like, I think I probably downplayed the importance of Zach Whitecloud. I have watched him intensely the last 2. I didn't think he was great in that first game back. And I know it didn't look like he played that, the Henrique goal very well against Anaheim when Cotter was back checking. And actually what happened there is Cotter shouldn't have been able to take the guy driving the net, and Whitecloud got caught in between. If you watch Whitecloud, he is so good at the hit and pin. Like, and there's a real art to this because, man, you're right on the brink of taking holding penalties. He slows down a forecheck so well. And it's from a subtle body positioning thing. And even, I don't realize how good he is at even, getting the puck through the neutral zone. It's not him going to the net for me. Okay. Like, he's got okay offensive instincts in the zone. I think he's better than I realized and more consistent than I realized at breaking pucks out. He's a smart player. He's exactly the player I'd want in front of me. And Nick Hague is way better playing with him. But when you hear them talk about this team wanting a left shot D-man for playoffs, doesn't that scream Nick Hague? Like, who's else coming out? Because, I mean, Marty and Petro aren't, and they're not going to get split up again, I don't think. And you're not splitting up McNabb and Theodore.
McNabb's not coming out.
So, to me, that just screams we want to upgrade Nick Hague, which also screams to me that, what's his future? Do they think he's where he needs to be? And I would argue, I really like him with Whitecloud if he's got to be in that lineup, because Whitecloud makes him better.
The best draft pick they've had in franchise history that stuck around with the team, and you're already shipping him out after not even 100. Maybe he's at 100 games, but man. So that brings me to the next topic, which we're going to bring Jason up on. And I think that this is one that is kind of related to that. Their lack of drafting has been a problem. They have not been able to draft players that can play important minutes with the Golden Knights. So today, on a podcast with our buddy Jesse from The Athletic, they have the Athletic Hockey Podcast, I believe it's called. Jim Nill was on that podcast, and they asked him about the flat cap and kind of just managing through the flat cap and the challenges that come with that. And they knew it was coming for a little while here. And basically what Jim said was that it's always a flat cap, that when the cap goes up, we just give more money to the most expensive players. So instead of it being, we try to find our money and save it, we just give that extra. If the cap's going to go up $5 million in the next 2 years, it's just going to be $5 more million for Connor McDavid or whoever's the best player. And he said the key is you have to manage the rest of your roster. You cannot just have an NHL team that is top players and nothing else. It basically was Jim Nill saying the Golden Knights are doing this wrong, is what it sounded like to me. He didn't outright say that. My question is, if the Golden Knights did not have the flat cap, if it were to have gone up over the course of this time, do you think they would have bought another superstar and another superstar, or do you think they actually would have built depth out? In other words, Are they learning?
Well, they're going to buy at the deadline. So they're going to buy at the deadline. So isn't that sort of answering your question?
Depends what they buy.
I mean, from the names that are out there, they're in the conversation with the Timo Meyers, the Patrick Kanes, Ryan O'Reillys. I mean, these are players that if they had the money in the offseason, they probably would pay, and they probably wouldn't be rentals.
They're three separate scenarios. Like, are they re-signing Patrick Kane if they trade for Patrick Kane? Are they re-signing Ryan O'Reilly if they trade for Ryan O'Reilly? Like, I don't know. If they trade for Timo Meier, they better have a plan to keep Timo Meier around. Like, that can't be a rental. Otherwise, you're burning a first-round pick for 20 games of Timo Meier. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, I don't see Meier headed there. Meier's qualifying offer is going to scare off a lot of teams because you either have to – he's not going to be a pure rental. The teams that really want him, they're going to want him long-term. And, you got a choice. You can either qualify him for one at 10 mil or you can try to do him up long-term. I mean, Carolina is about the only team that can handle either of those options next year.
I think New Jersey too, right?
And Jersey could probably Jersey, Carolina. You're probably looking at him. It's funny though because Jim Nill is 100% right, but that's also a team that has Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin on huge contracts as their top two that are not value contracts whatsoever. Now,
pre-flat cap though.
Yeah, but I would also
do those contracts look as bad if the cap is 90 million right now? I don't think so.
I think no matter what they get seen like that, but I'm also in the group that doesn't give a shit what Jamie Benn makes. He's worth the money.
I agree. Sagan is a different argument, though.
That's right. So, I mean, would the Golden Knights go out and do something flashy? It's just we're all just waiting with bated breath to see that happen, aren't we? But we're kind of getting to that point, like who's left out of that superstar group that we think they really would actually go after? Tarasenko's gone. And I mean, Kane is still out there.
Sense to me, yeah.
Tarasenko was I agree with you, would have made sense. And
I mean, it would have been dumb, but it did make sense. Yeah.
Hey, dude, I get you, but I actually don't think it would have been that dumb because he would have come in at a cap hit that was something like 3.75. It would have been manageable. But honestly, like a Barbashev, if they go to get a Barbashev, he's still a hope. Like he's not a guarantee.
Right. He's not that one piece that puts him over the edge.
There's not that many guarantees out there at this point. And even Kane is kind of, I don't think you know what you're getting with Patrick Kane. I can't buy into that. If you get Timo Meier, you know what you're getting, and you're going to get it for a while in my eyes.
Yeah, but only for a month.
Well, if you're the Golden Knights, yes, that is true. Yeah.
We'll see, but we all know if they trade for Timo Meier, he's going to come with an 8-year contract.
You'd think so.
He's gonna.
How would they?
Which is inevitably going to lead towards selling off Marchessault, selling off Carlson for, I don't know, like the 2 pucks that are sitting behind me.
I mean, Meier is worth at this point every bit of 8. I mean, geez, he's definitely.
Did you see that move last night?
He's easily an $8.75-9 million player, I think. So,
is he better than Jack Eichel?
Well, I mean, if you're just looking for pure scoring, yes.
If I had to choose between players, I would take Timo Meier. I think he plays a heavier game. I think he plays more intense. I think he can score in different ways compared to Jack.
I mean, this team needs a power forward. They lost one, so they sort of need one. Real quick, Nick wrote down Dylan Larkin in the comments section. He's sort of the same thing, right? You would have to then somehow find a way to extend him or sign him in the offseason. And it sounds like he's probably going to test the waters.
He's a centerman too, and that's Golden Knights. Is that really what they're targeting as a center? And I know Ryan O'Reilly's been somebody who's kind of been talked about in Vegas terms. And I mean, how many centers do you really want to have here? And that was always, they addressed it with Eichel.
It's like for years, it was like they needed another winger. And then they got themselves four new wingers. And now we need more centers. And then they get themselves centers. And now it's like, we need wingers. You know what you actually need? A hockey team. You need a team around your superstars. You have enough superstars. It's time to put a team around the superstars. Well, and like they just consistently That's the problem. That's where the flat cap has killed the Golden Knights. They haven't had the extra $5, $6, $7 million, because I can make the argument they may not have gone out and gotten another superstar if the cap had gone up. They don't have those lower end players that could have made a difference that are making $2 million. Like, where are the Nick Cousins and like Bukestads and these types of players that they could have been able to have this summer that they just couldn't because they refused to acknowledge the flat cap existed?
Look at Dallas, man. This team has Ty Dellandrea. They have Wyatt Johnston. They have Yoel Kiviranta. They've got, I'm looking at low-level contracts here. I'm offhand.
Right.
I mean, even Rope Hintz is on a low-level contract right now.
Those are all drafted players, right?
Rope Hintz this year, he's making $3 million, a little bit over. Jason Robertson's making $7 million this year, which is still a value.
Well, yeah, but when you're going to get 30 goals, of course.
They're homegrown, and next year, what do you got? Joe Pavelski at 3.5. Like, they want to be there. They want to play in that tax-free state, which Vegas is, by the way. You don't have to pay a premium, but you have to pay a premium because it's Vegas. And here's my point. Like,
go ahead.
Last part of this. What did Jim Nill spend his money on to get a defenseman who was still on an entry-level contract? He spent a first-rounder on it to get Nils Lundqvist.
Yep.
But the player he got was 22 years old. That, if you're going to give up a first or second rounder, even if it's a bit of a hoper, boy, that makes more sense than giving up a first rounder at the deadline, unless you've managed to stockpile one somewhere. And Vegas has never been a seller. They haven't been able to do that.
So I just looked. They have, and I'll name off the players. These are players selected since the Golden Knights have been in drafts. So you can't take the Rupe Hintz and Riley Tufte and Dennis Gurianovs, those types of players. They have drafted Jake Ottinger, Miro Heiskanen, Jason Robertson, Marian Studenique, Ty Dellandrea, and Wyatt Johnson, and they traded a first-round pick for Nils Lundqvist. That's most of their team. That's most of the important parts of their team. So what that has allowed them to do is they can buy the players towards the bottom. They can buy the Joel Pavelski and not give him complete massive amounts of money. They can buy Mason Marchment, who hasn't even been as good as I think we expected him to be this season. He's a good player. Those are the types of players that they've been able to do. And I'm not sitting here trying to say that Jim Nill is some superstar of a GM. Like, his team looks better than the Golden Knights at the moment, but let's relax on that. He hasn't, whatever. But like, I do think that flat cap has kind of upped the importance of understanding how to build a full team out. And the Golden Knights have just completely flying right in the face of it. And I don't fully understand it. And I don't think it's going to change. And by the way, we're flat cap another year that we thought we might not be. There was a minute there where it looked like we were going up $4 or $5 million. It ain't. Like,
so is that why
going bankrupt? They're in trouble.
Is that why they're in on Barbashev and Achari? These are the guys that they want next year to be as their depth players. They don't go out and spend all that equity to get these two guys. Even though, like you said, Mike, they're, you're hoping for a lot from these guys, but
I still think you're going to overpay for those guys. That's the thing.
That's it. That's the problem. Is that
there's a better chance of overpaying. There is.
Yes.
Right.
And then if you want to keep them, now they need a new contract, and they're only getting that new contract if they have success here. So that will inevitably bloat the new contract. They need to find ways to get in on better opportunities that have been there in the past. Find the Chandler Stevensons of the world. Find the players that they were able to get in the expansion draft. Like, there were guys in that they do have the ability to find some of these players. And then, for the love of God, can we develop a draft pick? Like, that's been a huge problem. Like, you talk about Hague going, it's a problem.
Yeah. I mean, you want an example of a team that's done better about this and people realize is the Maple Leafs. You look at that lineup, and there's a lot of players that they've developed in-house in that lineup, man. Like, a lot. I'm looking at it right now. Like Engvall, Kings, yeah, but the Kings went into a full rebuild, so this is a little different. This is why I'm going to compare it more so to Toronto, because Toronto has not been in a rebuild to the same extent as the Kings, right? They've been successful.
And the top of Toronto's lineup is similar to this one.
Right.
So from the time that they've had some of these star players, like Tavares, Marner, Matthews, like they've still continued to draft and develop players pretty well, right? And that's where Vegas is not in the same ballpark. Like you've got Hall, Liljegren, Sandin, they all came from inside defensemen, right? And then you've got, look at Engvall and even Nylander on his contract's pretty good, but like they're still able to flesh out good contracts. Michael Bunting, like this is where you gotta
add in that trade. I mean, how do they come up with that?
Well, pro scouting, man. I played against Bunting.
Yeah,
I played against Bunting.
Okay.
Like, people don't look at the pros enough, man. American League, they look at the NHL. You got to look at the minors sometimes, man. Like Carter Verhaeghe is a guy. If you saw him in the American League, you knew this guy was going to fill a net in the NHL. It was a no-brainer. And the Lightning, to their credit, saw it, took him up, and Florida also said, "Hey, we've seen this guy, and we know he can be a bigger player than he is." So they bump him up, and look where he's at.
Well, the Golden Knights do they do this every summer. They like to buy the good AHLers that are not NHLers. They've done it for years and years and years. Curtis McKenzie, Daniel Carr, Brandon Peary. This year was Byron Frais and Sheldon Rimple. I mean, you can go back over the course of the history of the team. They don't look for those gems. The one they did try, Sakari Maninen, didn't really work out, or at least hasn't to this point. Maybe that'll change. But yeah, I do think they have to find a way. And then that'll bring me to kind of the last thing I wanted to talk about today, which is not overdoing it with what we've seen here recently. Like there's an article on goldenknights.com today that says the team is consistent. I don't understand how we're possibly publishing that. Nonetheless, it is there. I don't know. And I guess my point is, how do they can make sure that they're not falling into, we're in love with, we have the sixth defenseman again. Let's say we were 13-2, blow out the next 40 games. We're now 3-0. Bam, we must be 16-2. They have to be careful about that. And I don't know how they're going to be able to do that.
The other thing, seems like, real quick, doesn't it seem like those value players are almost more valued nowadays than they were a few years ago? So it's really tough to get a Bunting 100%. In a trade or a sign or some of the other guys that you mentioned, because teams understand that teams need depth players and they're going to just charge them more.
Yeah. Yep. And I'll be quick about those American League signings. You do need vets there, but they were handing out one-ways like candy to guys that really caught me off guard. Like Curtis McKenzie's a really good buddy. And I tell you what, he would have gone back to Texas in a heartbeat, but he got a 2-year one-way from Vegas and they told him, you got a good chance, they told him, hey, come in, play well, you'll make the team. That was an absolute lie. Like how many of these one-way players have been brought in that didn't get a sniff? And it started to kind of catch up, right? You haven't seen them being able to attract the same level of veterans any longer. Right. And I mean, the worst contract I ever saw in my life might have been Terrell Goulbourne got a one-way. Like I couldn't believe my eyes. He's another old teammate of mine. I like him. Nice guy. I don't know. I have the same agent as him. It's the greatest contract I've ever seen for a player/agent. I don't know how that happened.
You got a good agent then.
Fantastic agent. Elaine Waugh, I love you. You were the best. He kept getting me contracts. I don't know how he pulled that off, but I don't know. Like you're not going to go to the American League and find your next savior, but you can definitely data mine that league and identify guys that when they show up in the end and you see a glimmer of something like a Bunting, you go, maybe there's something here. This guy's been a point a game. He's still young. Maybe we can get more out of him. So
especially when he's scoring against you. That's the problem with the Michael Bunting one. He was scoring only against the Golden Knights in his entire career. Then he hits the free agent market and goes to Toronto.
If they don't start drafting and developing better, it's going to be a long road. And, how much is there to show for it? Remember Jack Dugan came out, signed early, right? Where's he now? You've had a lot of people run through that lineup now at this point.
What happened to Jimmy Schultz? I know he wasn't drafted, but he was brought in and they expected something from him.
Jimmy Schultz was a Hobie finalist, I think, with McCarr and Fox. I want to say all 3D. I want to say.
Yep.
But I don't know if you watch Jimmy Schultz play in the American League, it just wasn't there. But here's the thing, they also promise you the world, right? Come out of school early, we'll give you your first NHL game. And this happens with guys. Teams do this. They get guys
really, it's only worked out for Whitecloud.
Yeah. Well, and Whitecloud was older,
he
though, too.
He was also not in as high of demand. Like, he was in some demand, but he was not in nearly as high a demand as what Jimmy Schultz was. Most teams would have signed Jimmy Schultz. I think I remember him saying he had like 28 offers or something like that.
He did.
I don't think that was the case for
Whitecloud. He went to an organization that, it took one bad year. See ya. We're done.
Yep.
And that's what happens. But Reed Duke sure got a long time out of it, though.
Ooh.
So,
do you think, like, are you concerned that they're going to fall in love with some of the recent results and therefore overdue? Like you were talking about, they have a stretch coming up. It's 5 games in 8 days on a ridiculous road trip, followed by tough home games on the inside and outside of that trip. Like, yes, you could use the help to get through that, but I'm concerned they're going to fall in love with these results that they're going to get, because I think they're going to get a result tomorrow. I think they're going to get a result in Chicago. So I think they're going to win at least 5 of 6 coming out of the break, and possibly all 6, because Tampa usually does not play very well against the Golden Knights. The Golden Knights play well against Tampa. They have a very good chance of winning all 6, and then it gets really difficult real quick. Like, I could see them falling in love with these results.
I don't think they're that naive. I think they know what they're up against.
They just posted an article that said they're consistent. I think they're naive.
Just pass on that.
You ever
go back to what you were saying? Pass on that comment.
You guys ever spun anything? But
they actually don't, by the way.
Yeah, I know, and that's the problem. Is when you're not a mouthpiece for something, right? It's tough.
We don't.
I think they've been consistently bad at times and not able to score at times. I don't think they've been consistently good all year by any stretch.
I don't think they've been consistently good in these 3 games, Mike. Like, I know that there have been good moments. I know that, like you said, they got the job done over the course of these 2 games. But, like, yes, you were doing very well against Anaheim. Good job. I'm super impressed. But, like,
the Minnesota game was pretty close, actually.
Third period had a breakaway. They had a breakaway in the third period against Anaheim that if he scores that, we're tied. Like,
yeah, I know.
And no one would have bothered Aidan Hill. Like, whatever. Oh, they gave up a breakaway. Like, it was a breakaway from the red line. Like,
oh yeah.
The game against Minnesota.
5.5 goals per game, though, right? Since the break.
I get it. And
that's what they're going to look at.
They're not giving them up. They're not giving up shots. I get it. But then there's Cassidy, who's going to tell you, I don't think we played that well in Minnesota. Like, he doesn't think they're playing all that consistently. Even. So yeah.
I thought Minnesota
he mentioned the breaks.
It's like I meant when I said this earlier, truly, that they took care of business. They did what they needed to do to make these games go. Right, Minnesota, they ran them out of the building in the first period, but the game from there was pretty even. There were still things to clean up. Like, so
when they were on a back-to-back, when Minnesota was on the back-to-back, and you should be pushing them. And Dad's trip's in the middle of that. By the way, Dad's trip continued. Most of the dads were still in town against Anaheim. We'll see what happens. Let's look at the next game.
I don't want to bag on those 2 wins at all. Like, I get that they were pretty close and they could do things better. They did what they needed to do in the right moments to make those happen. So let's see what happens over this next course, and let's look at
let's look at the next game. The next game, I was talking to Jason before we started. San Jose's been a weird team. They're not good. We know they're not good. However, they do a couple of different things. One, they score. They can score goals. They have potentially the Norris winning defenseman. I am assuming he's still going to be on the team. They still have Timo Meier. I'm assuming he's still going to be on the team tomorrow. Thomas Hertl's still there. They have guys who can score. They can score on you. The other thing they've done, they've beaten some good teams. They've beaten some good teams recently. Brought Carolina to overtime and lost in that game. They beat Tampa. They beat Washington. Like, they've beaten some good teams recently. Are you concerned that this team can come in and actually beat the Golden Knights?
Yes.
Sure. Of course. It could happen with any team. Yeah. And you got Timo Meier still performing at a pretty high level. And I don't trust San Jose's goalies at all, though. So,
but we've seen good appearances at time from them. Yeah, you're right. Good question, Ken.
I think it's a pretty cool matchup to see Hill play against his old team, because typically goalies play well against their old team.
Not
typically.
Fleury.
And that's what I was going to say. But Fleury had always been an ex-team killer until that game, really. Maybe I shouldn't say until that game, because I can't remember what else he did against the Golden Knights. But I remember he came back. Remember he came back last year? Shut him. Do you remember last year when Fleury made he had an absolutely sick game? I don't think it was a shutout. I think he only allowed one goal or something, and he was the third star, or he wasn't even a star of the game.
It was Ben Hutton. It was Ben Hutton. It was one goal.
It was his comeback game. Yeah. And the Vegas player was the first star of the game. That's the
only time it's the only other time that he has played against the Golden Knights, other than this last game where they just lit him up.
Yeah. So
can we throw the stars of the night in the trash? I mean, it means absolutely nothing. It's just whoever they feel like voting for. I mean, Eichel's been the number one star for the past 5 out of 6 games. I mean, I'm making that up a little bit, but realistically, he hasn't been the number one star, yet they keep putting him up there.
Well, it's picked by the home team's broadcast. So
here it is.
Yes.
It is in Vegas. It's not in every city.
Right. That is correct.
There are many cities where they have a rotating writer write it, or there's I went to New York and they had us vote on it, which was kind of cool. Yep. But all right, so let's make the picks. Let's go ahead and just make the picks. We have expressed a bit of concern. There's going to be 2 games before we do goalie interference. No, 3 games before we do goalie interference again. 2 home games: San Jose tomorrow, Tampa Bay. What is this 7:30 bullshit on Saturday? Get this out of here. Oh, my God, so stupid. And then on Tuesday, they're in Chicago, who set the NHL record today for biggest underdog in the history of the league since they've been keeping these numbers. Shout out to them. And they gave up a goal 9 seconds into said game. If you thought Anaheim was bad, Chicago is worse.
But Chicago scored right away. They scored. They returned.
They did.
And answered
They
right
scored
away.
Less than a minute later. However, that's embarrassing. And they got their asses kicked. They suck. They're horrible. And they don't try. They got to win 2 of these 3, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. There's no way.
I don't know. I mean, if they lose tomorrow night,
dude, they can't lose that Chicago game. Chicago's game against Toronto night, I popped it up for the last period or so. And as soon as it came up, I kind of went, well, that was as expected. It was 5-2 or something. That's what the score needs to be against Chicago. Now, San Jose is, to me, you still have some decent parts there in San Jose. And Carlson's playing out of his mind too. So I think they beat San Jose, but by the skin of their teeth, man. Like a 4-2 empty netter or something.
I was going to say, I think it's a 4-3 game either way.
I think it's a close game. I think Tampa Bay beats them 5-1. And then I think they get their clocks cleaned by Tampa Bay. Now, I haven't looked to see, and I'm going to do this right now to see what Tampa's coming for travel. Because they're
playing Arizona right now, and I believe it's 0-0 in the third.
And then they have 2 days off.
I'm going to go ahead and say I think they lose to San Jose tomorrow, and I think they lose to Tampa, and then they win against Chicago.
You know why they have a chance against Tampa?
5 days, 1 game.
Dallas. Do they go to Dallas?
No. Tampa's 2 days off in Vegas before. Yeah, they have 2 days off in Vegas before. Yeah, Vegas flew.
They very well could be having rookie party in Vegas, even in February. Yeah. I have not looked at their schedule. I don't know if they would have. Tampa might have already had it in Montreal earlier this year as well, though. So maybe they've already had it. I don't know.
But Tampa guys have been in Vegas for years now at the award shows, playing this.
Yeah, so is Washington.
Team. I know, but Washington actually won here, so they
it's
feel
late
like
in the season
celebration every time they come.
They're going to be rested anyway. I think Tampa beats them 5-1, and then I think that against Chicago, they beat Chicago. They have to beat Chicago, and I'm going to say it's like a 3-1 game or something, a laugher. I think it'll be a good game for Hill or Brossoit even. Brossoit's going to come in, allow 1, and look great.
We've been asking for it for how long now? It's finally going to happen. We've been asking for Brossoit for over 2 months, and we're finally going to see him on the ice.
I'm going a little off the rails with my picks. San Jose is going to beat him. I don't like to say it, but San Jose is going to beat them. I think the Golden Knights are a little too high on their horses at the moment, and I think San Jose is going to come in and want to play a pretty good game. I think San Jose gets the lead, and Vegas struggles to find a way to score enough on them to be able to get in that game. I'll say it's 4-2. Vegas loses that one. I believe they'll beat Tampa. I think they will score early. The game will be fairly close. They'll score enough where Tampa will kind of come undone as the game goes on. I also think there's probably going to be a lot of mistakes in Tampa's game. I'm assuming they're going to win at Arizona today. It's tied in the third period. So maybe they don't 0-0 in the third period. But if they do, they're coming in on a 4-game win streak with 2 days off in Vegas and another day off afterwards. Wouldn't shock me if they stay another day afterwards. I think that they will play poorly. The Golden Knights will win that game. And then I think that they will beat Chicago by at least, ready? 5 goals. I think they will win at least by 5.
Why not a touchdown?
7-2.
Yeah. 7-2, 6-1, something like that. Yeah.
Well, let's just hope
and I think everyone will be pumped if they score.
By the way, I
think they're in good shape to come to Vegas.
I don't think it's a massive failure if they lose to San Jose tomorrow. I mean, I just think that it'll be a competitive game. And I think that, San Jose does come to play Vegas. We saw it earlier this year.
Yeah, there's still the rivalry. I mean, it's just the Chicago game you can't lose. So, yeah, I agree with you. But we need to start a GoFundMe. Vegas makes playoffs. Get me to Vegas.
Well, we can work on that.
I know someone that we might be able to fund that, and that is Alec Martinez, who recently bought a helicopter tour with. I think that's fair. I can't get over that. Not to mention, I think it's going to be hilarious when Alec Martinez actually takes the helicopter tour with Kolazar and White Cloud. That's going to be great. Thanks again to the Jim Jimerson Law Firm for sponsoring this show every single week. We will be back again next week. 3 games. They're going to win. Yeah, they're going to win all 3. Who am I saying they're going to lose to San Jose? I'm backing off my pick already like an idiot. They're going to win. They're going to be super consistent. Great team coming back. But I do think next month is going to be tricky, and we will be here to talk about it every Wednesday. This is it. Good night, everybody. See ya. Thanks, Jim Jimerson Law Firm.